This scene feels inevitable, because while you are watching the final battle between Harry Potter and Voldemort, you slowly realize that this is not simply a fight between a hero and a villain anymore, but the emotional ending of an entire generation's childhood. And what makes the scene feel so powerful is the fact that the movie understands that the audience is not only watching two characters trying to defeat each other, but watching the conclusion of years of fear, loss, sacrifice, and destiny finally colliding in one final moment inside Hogwarts. From the very beginning of the scene, everything feels emotionally exhausted, almost broken, because the world around the characters no longer resembles the magical place audiences fell in love with at the start of the franchise, and instead, Hogwarts feels destroyed, cold, empty, and wounded, which immediately creates the feeling that innocence itself has disappeared from this universe forever. And that atmosphere becomes incredibly important because the final battle does not feel exciting in a traditional blockbuster way. It feels tragic, desperate, and emotionally heavy long before the duel itself even begins. Today we'll find out why this scene, why the confrontation between Harry and Voldemort became one of the most memorable endings in modern fantasy cinema, and why the emotional impact of this scene has almost nothing to do with magic itself, and everything to do with the feeling of finally confronting the fear that has haunted these characters for their entire lives. First, let's provide a little context. Because before this moment, Harry Potter has spent his entire life being defined by Voldemort's existence. And from the very first film, the story constantly reminds us that Harry was never allowed to live like a normal child. Because even as a baby, he became connected to a war that began long before he could understand it. And throughout the entire franchise, every friendship, every loss, every danger, and every sacrifice slowly pushes him toward this exact confrontation, whether he wants it or not. And what makes the final duel so emotionally effective is the fact that the movie never treats it like a normal action climax, where the hero simply becomes stronger than the villain and wins through power alone, because emotionally the scene is built around exhaustion rather than excitement, and both Harry and Voldemort feel like two people who have already lost almost everything long before the fight actually begins, which gives the confrontation a strange sadness underneath all the spectacle. The film carefully builds this atmosphere through the destruction of Hogwarts itself, because the castle that once represented wonder, friendship, safety, and childhood now feels like the remains of a dying world. And every hallway, every broken wall, every piece of debris surrounding the battle constantly reminds the audience how much has already been sacrificed just to reach this final moment. Before the hero takes the next step, hit like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks. One of the most devastating moments in the entire finale happens when Harry walks into the Forbidden Forest and allows Voldemort to kill him, because for a few minutes both the characters and the audience genuinely believe that Harry Potter is dead. And the silence, the hopelessness, and the image of Voldemort carrying his body back to Hogwarts make it feel like evil has truly won. But what makes the moment unforgettable is the fact that Harry survives precisely because he was willing to sacrifice himself for others. And when he finally returns, it doesn't just feel like the comeback of a hero, it feels like hope itself coming back to life. When Harry finally confronts Voldemort directly, the scene immediately feels different from most fantasy battles because there is surprisingly little triumph in the atmosphere, and instead the movie creates this terrifying emotional stillness between them, almost as if both characters understand that their entire identities only exist because of each other, and that realization gives the duel a psychological weight that goes far beyond magic or visual effects. The cinematography during the battle becomes incredibly important because the movie constantly isolates Harry and Voldemort from the rest of the world around them, making the conflict feel deeply personal, despite the massive scale of the war happening around Hogwarts, and the darker lighting, the cold colors, and the ruined environment all make the confrontation feel less like a heroic fantasy sequence and more like two ghosts dragging each other toward the inevitable end of a curse that has poisoned countless lives. And what makes the scene especially powerful is the way Voldemort himself is portrayed during the final moments, because beneath all the power and fear surrounding him throughout the franchise, the movie slowly reveals somebody who is completely incapable of understanding love, sacrifice, or human connection, and that emotional emptiness becomes his true weakness rather than magic itself, because Harry survives not through superiority or domination, but through the relationships and sacrifices that Voldemort spent his entire life rejecting. The duel itself feels chaotic and emotional rather than elegant, which makes it feel strangely real despite the fantasy setting, because the movie understands that this battle is not about creating visually perfect choreography, but about releasing years of emotional tension that audiences have carried since the beginning of the story. And every spell, every scream, every collision between them feels emotionally charged because viewers understand exactly how much history exists underneath every second of the confrontation. And then the final moment arrives, when Voldemort is finally defeated, and what makes the scene unforgettable is not the victory itself, but the silence afterward. Because for the first time in Harry's life, the fear that defined his entire existence is suddenly gone, and the movie allows that emptiness to linger emotionally instead of immediately celebrating it, which gives the ending a surprisingly melancholic feeling underneath the relief. Because the truth is that Harry does not simply defeat a villain in this scene, he survives a lifetime of fear. And that's why the emotional impact feels so powerful even years later, because beneath the magic, the spells, and the fantasy spectacle, the movie is ultimately telling a universal story about confronting the thing that has controlled your life for as long as you can remember, and finally realizing that fear only remains powerful as long as you continue running from it. That's why this scene feels tragic, emotional, and strangely beautiful at the same time, because it captures the painful reality that growing up often means losing innocence, losing safety, and losing the world you once believed would last forever. And by the end of the battle, Hogwarts no longer feels like the magical home from the earlier films, but something much more human, a place permanently changed by suffering, sacrifice, and survival. And that's exactly why this moment stays with you for the rest of your life.